everyone, welcome to another Classic Movie Monday and another start to another week of movie making, or video making and movie and book and music and random commentary. So without further ado, let me discuss this particular film that I want to discuss for Classic Movie Monday. And that, as you can see by the title and the thumbnail, is Jurassic Park. I find Jurassic Park to be one of those very, one of these films that I think is classic in the sense of its genre, in particular science fiction slash sort of adventure. Usually we don't see films that have gotten this significant amount of attention or have really as held up as much as a film like this. Usually films that involve science fiction plus this kind of adventure-esque aspect usually get kind of sort of thrown under the bus, so to speak, as far as their quality is concerned, meaning that there's not a whole lot that I think are as recognized. Usually with science fiction adventure films too, it's either we treat it as a very serious matter, or there's like maybe this horror to it, or it's more focused on the science fiction as opposed to the adventure, for example, like the Alien series. So and not a whole lot of it is kid-friendly unless you consider Star Wars, which sort of again tried to kind of capture maybe a similar feel like Jurassic Park by inserting maybe a little bit of whimsy. But I feel like Star Wars was a little bit more like Jurassic Park. So again, there's just something about Jurassic Park that I think is rather unique, and I think those reasons that I've explained of it being this really interesting mixture of science fiction as well as adventure is something that you don't usually see from films, and you usually don't see dinosaurs within films. So, so whenever you see a film with dinosaurs in it, you usually think of this film. So it's unique in that sense as well. There's just, I think, though, a lot still to enjoy from it, too. There's good acting, there's likable characters, there's a good plot. It seems to flow really well. It's very fast-paced, there's a lot of thrills, there's a lot of sort of, uplifting moments, there's a lot of terrifying moments, it just has this whole package filled in, instead of focusing maybe on one particular kind of mood or setting. And so that's what I think a lot of people sort of got behind. It's like a ride. You have points where it's kind of calm and soothing, and then other points, you're going full speed. And again, I think that was kind of the idea behind Jurassic Park, considering the fact that there's a ride within Universal Studios that is dedicated to this film. So the film treats itself like a ride, and I think that ultimately works to its advantage really well. Now, there is some argument as in regards to the plot holes within this film. In particular, the science, since the science is kind of goofy in how ultimately they try to reconstruct dinosaurs to exist, since it probably wouldn't be the most logical, considering the fact that there's only this kind of specific way in which they can recreate dinosaurs. And also the fact that they didn't account for things like, the genders changing and then suddenly they're able to breed. I think that those things are sort of legitimate things that you could sort of nitpick into. But I think when it comes to these kinds of films, the focus is not so much on whether or not the scientists get it right, but I think what oftentimes happens with science is sometimes you just don't think about the consequences. It would be nice, we would think, in a more realistic setting, yeah, scientists probably would definitely think more about the consequences of what they're trying to create. But we have to realize that the person who really is responsible for creating Jurassic Park is someone who's not really necessarily a scientist as much as he's more of a businessman, and he's a visionary. And I think the visionary aspect is something that kind of gets, and again, it could probably mess with some scientists too. Like, they discover this new thing and it just blows them away, and they feel like they have to share it to the world, and they don't take into account what they're creating and what it ultimately means. They just only see the good. It's kind of like, for example, how right now they're creating sort of the Internet of Things, which means that they're putting in, they're attaching basically, or giving an internet infrastructure to things that weren't really connected to the internet before. Now, again, the businesses who are creating these things are only going to say positive stuff about it. They're not really going to look into like the negative implications of what the Internet of Things could mean for people. And again, and these are things like cars, being connected to the internet, tons and tons of different stuff, watches, and again, doesn't take into account what if I lose my watch, and everything that I have, all my personal information's on the watch, and it's connected to the internet. So yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of things, that I think, again, scientists and visionaries, they don't take into account for. Why? Because part of being a scientist is oftentimes, making money and making a living off of your new innovation. And that was really the same mentality that the creator of Jurassic Park had. He saw the vision, he saw the dream. He just didn't see the reality of what he was putting other people into, and what ultimately he was putting himself into. So we get a big disaster, and that's really, I think, something that is reflective of sort of human nature, to not think of the consequences at times. And some people, like the nostalgia critic, like to complain about this, and but it completely disregards human nature and the desire to survive and to create something in order to make a living. So again, that's something that I think needs to be taken into account for when it comes to this kind of a story. And again, it's not supposed to be hard science. It's not supposed to be something like maybe Interstellar that actually kind of took the science very seriously. And even then, some people complain about Interstellar and its plot holes, whatever those may be. I did not see that film, so I can't say. But to be honest, when it comes to this this kind of a story, with this kind of a plot, I think ultimately, despite its various nitpicks that you can go through, I don't think the film's intention is designed to be hard, raw science. It's just designed to be a dream. It's like Disneyland, You know the Dumbos that are like that are going around the park aren't real. But again, the creator of the ride was trying to, again, bring some kind of reality to it, like that, you could fly like Dumbo, Jurassic Park's that kind of same, it's that same kind of mentality, and the way it sort of treats science. It's not real, raw, truthful science. It's just fun experimentation science that somehow within this scenario managed to work. I mean, again, the plausibility of it happening in real life probably fairly slim, but at the same time, even slim things can happen. Like they said, nobody could have predicted the internet. There's just things that we'll never know that we're capable of doing, and then suddenly we realize we're capable of doing. So I think that's just something to take into account. Also, I think what really works for this film is the CGI and its effects. Even though the puppets may look a little bit like the animatronics look a little dated, they still have this kind of funness to them. They're kind of like these little Disney animatronics, or like big Disney animatronics. There's just a cuteness to them, and you feel like that they're more real because they're actual animatronics. They're not some CGI, computers. But when they do use CGI, it's very effective, and Spielberg, again, was really noted for putting in the CGI, and it's been considered a very revolutionary aspect of a revolutionary technique that films started to use later on, and Jurassic Park really was one of those films that kind of captured the CGI fairly well for its time. So again, that's why I think a lot of people remember it. Another thing, music is fantastic. Like you feel you feel the wonder, you feel the excitement, the energy. It's just all there. It's John Williams music, and it's just brilliant. You just can't go wrong with it. And I also think the transitioning of moods, again, like I said, this film kind of gives in all these different kinds of packages. It gives you really intense and terrifying scenes, but it also gives you very, very peaceful and sort of innocent and maybe sometimes cutesy little scenes. So it kind of tries to bring in that adult and kid audience that I think, in particular, for some reason, the 90s was able to really do really well. Bring in adult as well as children audiences. But since we live in a very PC world, that probably will not end up happening for quite some time. But this film, I think, did it really well. You feel the intensity when there's bad, crazy stuff happening, and you feel sort of you feel like you're getting a breather when there's like these little funny or cutesy moments within the film. So I think that's something that usually sometimes films have a hard time doing, and I think this film did a really good job of understanding how to transition with moods and such. And again, it's really pretty much what you would expect from a Spielberg film. The kind of whimsy, the adventure, all that stuff. But we didn't see one, I think, on this level of scientific, we didn't really see like this taken under like a scientific lens in the sense of dinosaurs. Like, for example, E.T., again, although it is whimsical, it definitely doesn't, it's definitely not the same as something like Jurassic Park, even though it does bring in these kinds of similar concepts and ideas of emotion. Jurassic Park's more about the experience, whereas E.T. is a little bit more about the friendship between E.T. and again, E.T. more character-based, Jurassic Park more plot. Based, with a little bit of character development in there, but again, the characters are likable, but they're not there. We just want to see them survive. As far as their relationships go, we really don't ultimately really feel too much, unless you can count the Dr. Grant kind of bonding with the kids, but even then, it's kind of not really the primary focus. It's just sort of like a side plot thing. So, again, plot is, I think, more of a huge emphasis within this film, and ultimately, just again, the consequences of not seeing the negative aspects of trying to recreate something, and again, the human greed element probably too as well. But in case there are those out there who have not seen Jurassic Park or who have not heard of Jurassic Park, let me give you a brief plot summary so you are no longer confused. John Hammond was who was played by the late uh, I believe it's Richard Attenborough. Ugh. I apologize for butchering that name. But basically, John Hammond within this film. It's a much easier name to pronounce than his actor's name. John Hammond within the film creates basically Jurassic Park. How does he create Jurassic Park? Well, I don't really want to give that away because that's kind of that's kind of spoiling it, and plays sort of a role within the plot. But basically, Jurassic Park is a place where dinosaurs are alive and they exist. Like basically, it's a place where dinosaurs are basically resurrected from the grave. And they're sort of, I guess you could consider cloned from basically the dead dinosaurs' DNA, so to speak. And so that's how we're able to replicate them to create dinosaurs. And again, won't give away how they get that DNA. But basically, he wants to create a theme park surrounding this creation because money. I mean, if we could recreate dinosaurs, that would be a very huge big money incentive, like big money incentive for people, because it's just something new. It's something different. Again, it's not just your basic, animals that we see nowadays. You're seeing like these huge, gigantic, long neck plant eaters, and then you're seeing a T-Rex, that's just so fierce and powerful and just big, it's just, there's just a grandness to it, and that's where the money lies. And again, they kind of do try to make it seem like that, especially with, how grand it is. Like, wow, they're so big, and wow, they're so cool, because they're dinosaurs. However, and again, you could say this is kind of what makes John Hammond a kind of complicated character. Due to an accident that happened, that you'll see within the beginning of the film, the investors who are, again, putting money into the park got very concerned about their investment because, again, safety is a primary concern. Similar to, like, any theme park is, safety is always, number one priority. Sometimes even before you go on rides, they have a whole explanation on, if you have so-and-so problems, you should not be riding this ride, So that's kind of what the investors were concerned about, because, again, it's all about the money. So basically, what ends up happening is that a lawyer, Hammond's lawyer, or technically, I guess you could say it's his lawyer, or the investor's lawyer, he basically says, yeah, you've got to bring in some experts here to show that the park's safe. So basically, what ends up happening is that they invite these two dinosaur experts, Dr. Grant and Ellie, I believe is her first name. I guess I'll just call her Dr. Ellie. Usually she's the one I don't really remember as much. I mean, she's nice, it's just I don't really remember her as strongly. Usually we don't really spend that much time with her either, so. And there's also Ian, who is played by the Jeff Goldblum. So yeah, those are our three main characters that ultimately end up coming into the film as a result of this accident that ended up occurring within the beginning. So they're there to sort of prove that the park is legit, it's safe, and yeah, I mean, if you dedicated your life to studying dinosaurs, probably is the first thing you want out of life is to go see dinosaurs. And these scientists are just like, oh my, they are just so gaga over every single dinosaur that they see once they're there. But again, it's just sort of to they're just sort of brought there for those reasons, to kind of inspect the park and ultimately see if it's gonna be a good investment. And the fact that they're experts sort of gives, again, a sense of legitimacy. So again, not everything ends up going as planned, and you will sort of see what consequences happen, who ends up living, who ends up dying. You'll see John Ammon's kids, or grandkids, excuse me, that end up being inserted as part of the plot too. So again, even though there's a lot of characters, again, they're not really all fleshed out as much. But again, the focus is more on the plot and the intensity of the experience, and not so much on the characters. We insert ourselves as basically the characters, is really largely what this film is really trying to do. But really, that's the plot of Jurassic Park in a nutshell, without giving anything away. Yeah, but I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this film. It's one of those classics that a lot of people know about, a lot of people have seen. I'm not going to talk about the sequels, because the sequels can go and hide under a rock for eternity, as far as I'm concerned, because they are in no way, shape, or form of quality as the first film. As far as Jurassic World is concerned, which is actually supposed to, I think, be coming out this year, apparently, I think in the summer, it's supposed to be one of those blockbusters. You never know, might be good, might be bad. Some people are not, I think, a fan of the CGI. I can understand that, but yeah, I mean, who knows? We might actually get a really good plot and some interesting characters to go along and enjoy the ride with. And see, that's the whole idea behind Jurassic Park, is to enjoy the ride. And in the second film, I didn't feel that, partially because a lot of the characters, because they, again, didn't have that same likability as they did in the first film. And it's the same with the third film. So again, the likability of the characters is important, I think. Again, you don't need to focus on them. They don't need to be the primary, they don't need to be the primary reason that you watch the film, but they need to carry the film. Otherwise, you're not invested in ultimately what ends up happening. So I think that's really something that's important to note. But, yeah, I think if you look at the concept, if you look at the grandeur surrounding the film, and, just this childish, kind of innocence to it that it sort of plays up, and, the idea of having adventures and dreams, and, and sort of realizing that reality is probably a lot different, but at the same time, it's important to appreciate, maybe things that are not really, again, just sort of discovered, so to speak. It sort of introduces that whole science thing. And again, I don't think this film is designed to be anti-science. It's just against the notion of using science as a means to not think of consequences. And again, greed being another big motivating factor too, not using science primarily for monetary value, and really seeing its implications and what it's going to have on society. I think that was really what the film was trying to hammer down, and I think usually films like this don't really focus on it. They just focus on how ultimately science ends up doing something wrong. Whereas you can clearly see that there were sort of selfish motivations for it. And you can sort of see the human element, though, too, of wanting to create something spectacular and beautiful for the world, and not realizing what consequences can come from it, and how maybe you feel like you're in control of the situation, but you may not be. So yeah, I think that's really all I can really say when it comes to Jurassic Park. It is enjoyable. It has this great way of showcasing its genre by combining sci-fi with adventure in this very upbeat, whimsical way, but also reflecting thrills and chills at the same time. And again, the best way I can describe it is like a ride. You're absorbed in the experience, and I think that usually films don't really do it as well in getting audiences into the experience and actually, being entertained while at the same time having, again, some kind of intelligence behind it. And I think Jurassic Park blended that entertainment value with the intelligence, I think, fairly well. Does it have some plot holes? Can you nitpick certain parts of it to death? Yes, you can. But I think its real intentions are to convey, again, a story about somebody who creates something and it ends up being more than what anybody could have thought or bargained for. So that's ultimately, though, I think all I can say. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.